The program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. The U.S. imposes tariffs on 60 trading partners in the latest escalation in the trade war. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Iran have been trading more strikes in the Gulf as fears of escalation mounts. Plus, at least 4 Palestinians and 2 Israelis are killed in shooting in the occupied West Bank. Let's begin the world today. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us again. The United States this morning announced new tariffs on 60 trading partners in the latest escalation in the trade war reignited by U.S. President Donald Trump when he returned to office last year. And those targeted, including the UK, China, and the European Union, will face a tariff of 10% to 12.5% on all goods, accounting for almost all American imports. The tariffs, which replace an identical levy which expires on Friday, are based on claims key economic partners have failed to properly tackle forced labor. The U.S. Supreme Court had ruled earlier this year that many of the tariffs imposed globally under emergency powers were illegally enacted. The 10% to 12.5% duties on imports were proposed last month by the White House and over concerns they were not doing enough to tackle forced labor. According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representatives, trading partners that have made commitments to adopt and effectively enforce bans on forced labor imports will be subject to a 10% tariff, while those that have not will have the higher 12.5% rate. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has claimed America is leading China by a lot. He was addressing the press at the unveiling of his ratepayer protection pledge, forcing companies to build or buy all energy needed for building and operating data centers.
You want to do, we're leading China by a lot, and using our old grid would not have worked. And I came up with the idea that, build your own plant. This way nobody can complain. You won't call me and say what a terrible job I'm doing, because we have a 200-year-old grid that's not the best in the world. You look at some places, you take a look at California, you have brownouts and blackouts every weekend. The last thing they're going to be able to do is supply electric at numbers. Nobody's ever explained to me why it's so much electricity, why you need so much, nor did I care that much, to be honest with you. All I know is you need more than double what we produce right now. Think of it. So we produce tremendous amounts of electricity for every business, and this industry needs more than double that amount. So we're letting you build your own with the Trump administration's ratepayer protection plan. The American innovators and consumers thrive to win together because we're insisting that AI data centers and big tech companies pay their own way, and that's what they're doing, and they're happy to do it.
Now, Iran says it has carried out drone strikes on U.S. military facilities and bases across the Middle East in retaliation for the 13th consecutive night of American attacks on the country. Explosions were reported along Iran's Gulf Coast and in western, northern, and central areas. 4 people were killed, 5 others injured in an attack in the southwest, according to Iranian state media. Iran later announced strikes on U.S. allied Kuwait, while sirens sounded in Bahrain and Jordan, and flights were suspended at a major Iraqi airport after a reported drone crash. It comes as Iran condemned the U.S. plan to use frozen Iranian assets to pay for war damages in a sign of further escalation between the two countries. On Thursday, the U.S. President Donald Trump said damages to ships and cargo in the Strait of Hormuz will be paid for by Iranian money, and that the United States has in its possession and controls. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi responded by saying that seizing another country's assets to pay for unrelated future claims is an incendiary precedent. We're staying in the Middle East. At least 4 Palestinians and 2 Israelis have been killed in a shooting in the occupied West Bank, the deadliest single incident there in months. There are conflicting accounts of the sequence of events in the northern village of Tau. Palestinians Palestinians told the BBC that residents confronted Jewish settlers who were attacking them. One eyewitness said soldiers had arrived and then started shooting. Israel's military said it had responded to reports that hikers had been attacked. It said terrorists stole the weapon of a security guard and killed him. It later said a soldier had also been killed, but did not give details. The IDF has not explained who killed the other Palestinians. The Israel Defense Forces says it is preparing for a major operation in the area and has cancelled soldiers' leave. There's been a surge in attacks by settlers on Palestinians and their property in the West Bank since the start of the Gaza war, which was triggered by the Hamas-led attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. One local leader of the ruling Fatah party told the media that settlers opened fire before Israeli forces arrived and also started shooting. He said two brothers and two of their cousins were among those killed. Palestinian officials said several other Palestinians were wounded. The IDF said Palestinians began the attack. We're back in the United States, where changes to immigration law has also impacted international students. A study released by the Association of American Universities reported that there has been a 17% drop in new international student enrollment. One incoming graduate student at Harvard University, Windele Mitiani from South Africa, has expressed the impacts firsthand. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird spoke to her in this interview.
We're so glad to be joined by Wandile, as he is a founder and a graduate student, potential soon-to-be graduate student at Harvard University. And we just want to spend some time with him today. As we know, there have been many changes around international students coming to the United States to continue their studies. And most recently, he has experienced some delay in his process as a result of some of the most recent U.S. policies around international students attending many of the U.S. universities. Please give us some updates, what's going on, kind of how these policies have adjusted some of your plans, which I know you're still continuing with. So congratulations with that.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I think as we all know, getting into Harvard is a pretty tall feat, and we all think that's the hardest part. I think this process has proven otherwise, at least during these times where I got in. And typically when students get in, there's a certain level of funding that they get in the form of either merit scholarship or needs-based. I didn't get either. And I remember emailing them and asking why I didn't get at least needs-based. Maybe they understood that I was rich and I wasn't aware of that. And, they just simply responded that their policies has changed. And it's because of their policy that they could not fund me. So, I found myself in a situation where, I'm one of 25 people in the world who's been accepted to this prestigious Masters in Design Engineering. And it's like $104,000 a year, and I have to pay it off pocket.
You mentioned that their policies have changed. We also know the U.S. policies around international students have changed. We've seen a decline in international students across the U.S. Tell us if the U.S. federal policies have had any impact, and if there is some aid that you might be available, or what potential aid you were not able to receive as a result of some of the federal policy changes.
Yeah, I think, off the email record, I think I've gotten more communication from some of the folks at Harvard about how, policies have changed for them internally. And, this is a really tough time to be an international student there. And that has affected, what's possible even within my particular situation.
So as we look to, you said that you were able to, despite policy changes internally at the university, you are still able to move forward. What has your journey been to getting to this point? Give us some insight into kind of, you're a founder, you've done some great work. You said you're one of 25 accepted to this prestigious program. What was your journey to this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up in informal settlements and townships in post-apartheid South Africa. And at the core of a lot of social ills within my community is the lack of dignified housing. Because without a house, you don't have a physical address. Without a physical address, you can't apply for a job, and you can't. It creates a cycle of poverty. Without a house, or in a mud brick shack where, let's say, 7 people are living there. There's no designated place for a child to do their homework, which affects education. If it rains, water seeps in through the mud brick and can cause asthma. So, from an early age, I've sort of vowed to solve housing, studied and became an architect and started designing solutions. I'm going to Harvard to combine that knowledge with AI so that I can scale the impact, especially with the climate change and the flooding for people who are most vulnerable living in shacks or informal settlements. How do they design and build better? So what I did when I found out I didn't have any funding, I decided, man, if I'm truly about this, what if I just walk across South Africa, live in every type of housing so that I can fully understand what people are going through, and also use that as a way to raise awareness, tell those stories, but also raise funds. So that's what I did between the 15th of April to the 16th of June. Life-changing experience. And, during that time, I raised about $10,000, which is a huge feat, especially during this economy and, the currency exchange with the South African rands. But, as we all know, based on the amount that I mentioned with Harvard, that was only, I think, just under 1/3 for one semester. And I've sort of been continuing to sort of raise the rest from, sharing the story on Facebook, Instagram, writing articles, connecting to foundations, etc.
What you've designed obviously not only can impact in your specific area where you're from in South Africa, but it can also assist all over the world. Tell us what your hopes are that as a result of going to Harvard and being able to continue your studies there, how this will have a global impact with your design.
Thank you. I think architecture is often viewed as a commodity for the rich, right? I studied architecture to think about how do we bring dignified design to the 99% of the world that do not afford us as architects. And I think AI is the solution, where people are able to put a pin like you do on WhatsApp, and it's able to assess the geotech of that particular location and advise folks like this is the type of foundation you need to build. And you can type, I want a 2-bedroom, I've got 200,000 rands, and this is my budget, and it designs that for you. And you can use like Pinterest images to be able to design your dignified home. And that is good enough to be passed to the municipality for approval. That's really what I'm doing. I'm within the palm of people's hands. I'm giving them the ability to design and have structural integrity within that, especially with a lot of the floods that are happening in South Africa, a lot of climate change, and people are losing their lives. And I feel like they're losing their life because of just lack of good design and knowledge, even in affordable ways.
Yes, yes. I am, as we think through kind of what is the next phase of this, the next phase of this, what does that look like? And so as you kind of think through what your next phase is, what is your hope is the outcome once you finish this program?
Yeah, I think my hope as an outcome is that everyone has an access to a dignified place to call home, because the minimum requirement to have a home, the minimum requirement to have a dream is a dignified place to call home. So I want to give people that opportunity by making it easier for them to design, build, and finance their own homes, especially within the continent.
Okay. Well, we will definitely continue to keep watching your story. Congratulations on your first step. And we will continue to learn more. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Germany's national rail, Deutsche Bahn, is banning alcohol on all of its train stations. That's on all 5,400 Deutsche Bahn-owned and operated train stations in the country. Some recent attacks have led to this development, and this marks a big shift for a beer-loving country. For more on this ban and the reasons behind it, we're joined by the DW correspondent Vada Imran in Berlin. Vada, great to see you as always. Tell us about this ban and why now?
Yes, we're witnessing a big shift in attitude towards alcohol here in Germany. Train stations have always been a bit loose and open for everyone. There are no barriers of entry, and this can have both positive and negative effects. Now, the downside of selling alcohol on these train platforms and stations is that it does bring about a rise in violence and aggressive behavior. Just days ago, a Deutsche Bahn ticket collector fell from the train or was allegedly pushed and sustained life-threatening injuries after a violent altercation with an allegedly drunk passenger. Some recent crime statistics from Deutsche Bahn and the police also show that violent crimes in train stations are up by 50% just in the last 6 years. And some of the most dangerous stations are Leipzig in the east, Dortmund, and unsurprisingly, Berlin is also on that list. Now, Deutsche Bahn has already banned alcohol consumption in major train stations like Hamburg, Munich, and Frankfurt, but now they want this to be nationwide. In another incident, Deutsche Bahn security personnel lost his life after he got into an altercation with a passenger traveling without a ticket. So this ban stems from a lot of reasons.
Altercations at the train station is pretty normal over there.
Sadly, it seems that that's the case. According to data from the Interior Ministry in Germany, over 1,600 Deutsche Bahn employees were attacked at work just in the first 5 months of this year. That's over 1,000 attacks. And the new CEO of Deutsche Bahn says that security and safety are the reasons behind this latest move, and that violence increases where alcohol flows. But I do have to say that something about this new policy is contradictory, because while you cannot or should not consume alcohol on the platforms, according to this new policy, you still can drink in bars and restaurants based in the station. And that's not all. You can even drink on the train. So Deutsche Bahn will sell you wine and beer on the train, but won't on the stations. So as you can see, it's a good initiative, but I have to question how effective it will be. However, studies have shown that an alcohol ban, such as this one, can result in less violence. The example of Hamburg comes to mind. An alcohol ban plus increased video surveillance has led to crime being on the decline. This shows that there is definitely merit to such a policy.
And what of the residents of Germany? What do they think?
Well, that was also our first instinct, to find out what passengers and normal people think of this. We asked around Berlin, and the response was mixed. There was a general sense that this ban will be rather hard to enforce. Some people here said it's a great idea. They're on board. Others said that people will still continue to drink alcohol anyway. Many were skeptical. They said they want to have a beer before they visit their friend, or if they're on the way to a sporting event. One person said, so I can't drink on the platform, but I can on the train. What difference does that make? So that was generally the overwhelming response in Berlin. Many also said that to enforce such a ban, more security or police will be present on these major train stations, and that makes a lot of people here uncomfortable. But I bet that if this policy does bring down crime statistics across the country, everyone will be on board.
Indeed. Vada, thanks again for bringing this to our attention. South Africa is facing mounting diplomatic pressure after Ghana formally requested that all allegations of xenophobic attacks in the country be placed on the agenda of the next African Union Assembly. A move has received the backing of ECOWAS member states, signaling growing concern across West Africa over the treatment of foreign nationals in South Africa. It also places Pretoria's foreign policy and its long-standing commitment to African unity under renewed scrutiny, raising important questions about regional cooperation, migration, and the future of relations between SADC and ECOWAS.
South Africa has long positioned itself as a leader on the African continent through SADC and the AU, but incidents of xenophobic violence have somehow strained those relations, with Ghana taking South Africa to the AU over alleged attacks on foreigners. International relations expert Thembisa Fagude says Ghana is blowing things out of proportion.
Ghana is further amplifying a storm in a teacup. I don't think there's a need to further exaggerate what happened, what's going on in South Africa in terms of the so-called Afrophobia, xenophobia. These are very isolated incidences, very minimal injury, including deaths, and injury, including also destruction to property. I think Ghana is just trying to blow everything out of proportion and hiding behind these events as if these events occurred out of the blue. It is because of the failure of these despots and African governments that refuse to cater for their people, pushing their people not only to south-south migration, but also crossing the dangerous waters into the Mediterranean seeking better life.
Since the June 30th deadline set by vigilante groups in the country, more than 160,000 foreign nationals have fled South Africa, despite growing concerns from other countries The South African government continues to call for peace and its citizens to honor their international obligations.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has undertaken to send envoys to various countries in Africa to explain the position. But of course, it's a bit too late in the day because it's their fault in the first place. They should have ensured that the borders were protected and there was a legal flow of immigrants and those that are seeking opportunity in this country since 1994. But the situation has since deteriorated, and South Africa is trying to sort it out now. So there's nothing much that they can do except continuing to maintain the rule of law, making sure that they protect those that are in this country legally or illegally.
The government now faces the challenge of enforcing the law without breaking the bonds that holds the continent together. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
And as we end the program, Bolivian engineer Rolly Ronald Mamani has unveiled a RUIS, a home-built humanoid prototype designed to bring robotics closer to children and to young people. He presented this on Tuesday by robotic creators in Bolivia. The robot marks the team's first steps into the fast-moving world of humanoid technology. He said the team built the prototype using affordable materials and components available locally as developers around the world race to advance humanoid robotics. Romani also runs a robotics museum in Achocala near La Paz, where visitors can see dozens of exhibits, including robots, bionic prostheses. The museum was described by EFE in 2024 as the first of its kind in Bolivia. Romani is a graduate in electronic engineering from the Public University of El Alto. He's developed low-cut robotic prostheses and other devices designed to move technology beyond the laboratory and into everyday life. Yeah, that's sure to fascinate children and young people. Thanks again for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.